Before we begin, I need to tell you something about this video. You're not going to see a bunch of flashy images. You're not going to see quick cuts, memes, or visual dopamine hits every 3 seconds. This video is designed like a book. It's designed for you to actually listen, to focus, to think. And that's intentional. Because if you can't sit with this video without constant visual stimulation, then you've already proven why you need what I'm about to teach you. Your mind has been hijacked by the algorithm, by the quick hits, by the endless scroll. So here's what I'm asking. Give me your attention. Not your distracted, fragmented, screen-addicted attention. Your real attention. The kind of attention you'd give to a conversation that could change your life. Because this isn't entertainment. This is training. Now, let's begin. I want you to close your eyes right now. Actually, don't close them because you're watching this, but I want you to try something. For the next 10 seconds, I want you to think about absolutely nothing. Clear your mind completely. No thoughts, no images, nothing. Did it work? Of course it didn't. Because the harder you tried to think about nothing, the more thoughts flooded in. Your grocery list, that conversation from 3 days ago, that embarrassing thing you said in high school, the fact that you're failing at not thinking right now. And this is the problem that's destroying modern men. You've been told your entire life that discipline equals control, that mastery means forcing your mind into submission, that a strong man is one who can simply decide to focus and then, boom, he focuses. But what if I told you that this entire approach is why you're losing? What if the secret to mental clarity isn't about control at all? What if the ancient samurai knew something about the mind that modern productivity gurus are completely missing? This is Takeshi's secret. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why every meditation app, every focus technique, every optimize your brain course you've ever taken has been setting you up for failure from day one. Let me tell you about Takeshi. He's not a real person, but he represents a real principle that was taught in every legitimate samurai dojo for over 400 years. And the first thing Takeshi would tell you is that you're approaching your mind like a prisoner approaching a locked cell. You think the goal is to break out, to force your way through, to overpower the lock with sheer willpower. But here's what you don't realize. You're not locked in your mind. Your mind is locked in you. And the moment you understand that distinction, everything changes. So let's start with the control paradox, because this is where 99% of men are stuck right now. And I'm going to break this down in a way that's going to make you question everything you thought you knew about focus, discipline, and mental strength. The samurai understanding of mind. In classical Japanese martial philosophy, particularly in the schools of Yagyu Shinkage Ryu and later in the writings of Miyamoto Musashi, there's a concept called mushin, or no mind. But before we get to that, we need to understand what the samurai noticed about human consciousness that modern psychology is only just beginning to catch up to. The samurai weren't philosophers sitting in libraries. They were warriors who needed their minds to function perfectly under the threat of death. When a blade is coming at your neck at 60 miles per hour, you don't have time for affirmations. You don't have time to center yourself. You either respond correctly or you die. And what they discovered through centuries of life or death experience was this: the mind that tries to control itself is already defeated. Think about that. The mind that tries to control itself is already defeated. Why? Because control implies division. Control means there's a you trying to manage a separate mind. But you are your mind. There's no separation. The samurai understood that the moment you create this imaginary split, this idea that there's a disciplined you that needs to wrestle with an undisciplined mind, you've already lost. This is the control paradox. The more you try to control your thoughts, the more out of control they become. The Western trap. Now, compare this to what you've been taught in the West. You've been told that your mind is like a muscle. You've been told you need to train it. You've been told that discipline is about forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do until eventually you want to do them. And don't get me wrong, there's value in training. There's value in building capacity. But here's where the Western approach completely falls apart. It treats the mind as an adversary that needs to be conquered. You've probably experienced this. You sit down to work and your mind starts wandering. So what do? You tell yourself, focus, come on, focus. You might even get angry at yourself. Why can't I just focus for 5 minutes? And the more you fight your wandering attention, the more it wanders. Or you're trying to meditate and thoughts keep coming, so you try to push them away. You try to clear your mind. And instead of clarity, you get a mental traffic jam of thoughts, all demanding attention at once. This is what I call the Western trap. It's the belief that you can force your way to mental clarity through sheer willpower. It's the productivity culture that tells you to just do it and stop making excuses and be disciplined. But here's what they're not telling you. Willpower is finite. Force is exhausting. Control is an illusion. What science reveals about control. Let's get practical for a second because I want to show you that this isn't just ancient philosophy. Modern neuroscience backs this up completely. There's a famous study from the 1980s by psychologist Daniel Wegner called the white bear experiment. Participants were told to not think about white bears for 5 minutes. Simple enough, right? Just don't think about white bears. What happened? The participants couldn't stop thinking about white bears. In fact, they thought about white bears more than a control group who was told they could think about white bears. And when the experiment was over and participants were told they could think about anything they wanted, the "don't think about white bears" group became obsessed with white bears. This is called ironic process theory, or the rebound effect. When you try to suppress a thought, you actually strengthen it. Your brain has to keep checking, am I thinking about the thing I'm not supposed to think about? And every check reinforces the neural pathway of that exact thought. This is why when you're trying to quit porn, you think about porn more. Why when you're trying to not be anxious, you become more anxious. Why when you're trying to force yourself to focus, you become more distracted. The samurai didn't need peer-reviewed studies to figure this out. They learned it through experience. They learned that the warrior who tries to force his mind to be calm dies first. The warrior who fights his own fear becomes paralyzed by fear. The warrior who tries to suppress his anger becomes consumed by rage. So they developed a completely different approach. Not control, not suppression, not willpower. Something else entirely. Before we get to Takeshi's secret, before I tell you what actually works, you need to understand why your mind is chaotic in the first place. Because most men are fighting symptoms while the disease spreads. The samurai identified 3 core enemies of mental clarity, 3 forces that create the noise in your head. And until you understand these 3 enemies, no technique, no app, no morning routine is going to help you. Enemy 1, Attachment. The first enemy is attachment. And I'm not talking about attachment in the Buddhist let go of all earthly desires sense. I'm talking about something much more specific and much more insidious. Attachment is when you tie your identity to outcomes you cannot control. Let me give you an example. You're working on a project. Maybe it's a business. Maybe it's a creative work. Maybe it's your physique. You put in the work. You do everything right. And then it doesn't work out the way you wanted. The business fails. The project gets rejected. Your results plateau. And what happens? You feel like you failed. Not the project, not the circumstances, you. Your self-worth collapses because you attached who you are to something external. This is the trap that creates mental chaos. When you attach your identity to outcomes, every setback becomes an existential crisis. Every obstacle becomes a referendum on your worth as a man, and your mind becomes a battlefield of anxiety, second-guessing, and catastrophizing. The samurai understood this deeply. They lived in a world where death could come at any moment, where a single mistake in combat meant the end. They couldn't afford to attach their identity to outcomes because outcomes were largely outside their control. Instead, they attached their identity to the quality of their action in the present moment. Not the result, the action. Not the victory, the conduct. There's a famous story about a samurai named Yamaoka Teshu, who was challenged to a duel by a younger swordsman. This younger warrior was skilled, ambitious, and convinced he could defeat the aging master. On the day of the duel, Teshu arrived at the agreed location and immediately acknowledged that he would lose. The young warrior was confused. "If you know you'll lose, why did you come?" Teshu replied, "I came because it is the right action. The outcome is irrelevant." The young warrior was so struck by this response that he refused to fight. He realized he was still attached to the outcome of winning, while Teshu had transcended that attachment entirely. This is enemy number one. And if you're constantly stressed about results, constantly worried about what people think, constantly measuring your worth by external metrics, you're in the grip of attachment. And your mind will never be clear until you let it go. Enemy 2. Resistance. The second enemy is resistance. And this one is going to sound contradictory at first, but stay with me. Resistance is the mental force that arises when you fight against what is already happening. You're sitting in traffic. You can't change it. You can't magically make the cars disappear, but your mind is screaming, "This shouldn't be happening. I should be there by now. Why is this happening to me?" That's resistance. You're trying to focus on work, but you keep thinking about something else. Instead of acknowledging the thought and letting it pass, you get frustrated. "I shouldn't be thinking about this. Why can't I focus? What's wrong with me?" That's resistance. You experience an emotion, anger, sadness, fear, and instead of feeling it, you resist it. "I shouldn't feel this way. This is weak. I need to get over this." That's resistance. Here's what resistance does to your mind. It creates a secondary layer of suffering on top of the primary experience. The traffic isn't the problem. Your resistance to the traffic is the problem. The wandering thought isn't the issue. Your frustration with the wandering thought is the issue. The samurai had a phrase for this, "Nagare ni sakarao," which roughly translates to going against the current. They understood that a warrior who fights the river will drown. A warrior who works with the river will cross it. But this doesn't mean passive acceptance. This doesn't mean you just give up and become a doormat. This is one of the biggest misconceptions about this philosophy, so I want to be crystal clear. Non-resistance doesn't mean you don't act. It means you don't add unnecessary psychological suffering to the situation. If you're in traffic and you can take a different route, you take it. That's action. If you can't take a different route, you accept the reality and use the time productively. That's non-resistance. What you don't do is sit there stewing in frustration, replaying the should narrative in your head, making yourself miserable over something that's already happening. In the dojo, this principle was trained relentlessly. When a strike comes at you, you don't resist it. You don't meet force with force. You redirect it. You move with it. You use the energy of the attack against the attacker. The same principle applies to your mind. When a distracting thought arises, you don't fight it. You acknowledge it and redirect your attention. When an emotion arises, you don't suppress it. You feel it fully and let it pass. When circumstances change, you don't waste energy wishing they were different. You adapt. This is enemy number 2. And if you're constantly frustrated, constantly fighting reality, constantly in conflict with what is, you're creating your own mental chaos. Your mind will never settle until you stop resisting the current. Enemy 3. Identification. The third enemy is the most subtle and the most dangerous. It's identification. Identification is when you mistake the contents of your mind for who you are. Let me explain. Right now, you probably have thoughts running through your head. Maybe you're thinking about what I'm saying. Maybe you're thinking about something you need to do later. Maybe you're judging yourself for not focusing perfectly on this video. Most people experience thoughts and believe they are the thoughts. A thought arises, I'm not good enough. And they don't see it as a thought. They see it as truth. They see it as them. But here's what the samurai understood. You are not your thoughts. You are the space in which thoughts arise. This is a critical distinction. Your thoughts are like clouds passing through the sky. The clouds come and go, but the sky remains unchanged. You are the sky, not the clouds. But most men are so identified with their thoughts that they can't see the difference. This is why you feel like you can't control your mind, because you think you are your mind. When a negative thought appears, you believe it's you thinking negatively. When anxiety arises, you believe you are anxious. When anger appears, you believe you are angry. But what if those things are just weather patterns passing through? What if you could observe them without becoming them? In Zen training, there's a practice called shikantaza, or just sitting. The instruction is deceptively simple. Sit and observe your mind without trying to change anything. Don't control your thoughts. Don't suppress them. Don't follow them. Just watch. And what happens when you do this, when you actually practice observing your mind without identification, is profound. You start to realize that thoughts appear on their own. You don't create them. They just arise. And they pass, all on their own. An angry thought appears. You watch it. It passes. A worried thought appears. You watch it. It passes. A lustful thought, a jealous thought, an ambitious thought, they all arise and pass like waves in the ocean. And slowly you start to realize, if these thoughts come and go without your permission, how can they be you? If you can observe your mind, then you must be something separate from, or more accurately, something larger than your mind. This is the third enemy, identification. And until you break free from it, you'll always feel like a prisoner of your own thoughts. Because you can't control something you believe you are. You can only control something you can observe from a distance. Now we get to the core. Now we get to what actually works. And I'm warning you right now, this is going to sound simple. It might even sound too simple. You might think, that's it? That's the secret? But simple and easy are not the same thing. This is a practice that the samurai spent their entire lives refining. This is a principle that Zen masters devoted decades to mastering. And this is the key that will transform your relationship with your mind if you actually apply it. Takeshi's secret is this: you don't control your mind. You befriend it. Let that sink in. You don't control your mind. You befriend it. The shift from control to relationship. Everything we've talked about up until now has been leading to this moment. The control paradox, the three enemies, the reason why willpower fails and suppression backfires. It all points to one conclusion. The mind cannot be controlled through force, but it can be guided through relationship. Think about it this way. If you had a wild horse, you could try to break it through dominance and force. You could whip it, you could starve it, you could beat it into submission, and maybe you'd get a horse that obeys you out of fear. But that horse would never trust you. It would never willingly give you its full power. And the moment your control slipped, it would bolt. Or you could befriend the horse. You could learn its nature. You could work with its instincts instead of against them. You could build trust. And eventually, you'd have a companion that works with you not because it fears you, but because it wants to. Your mind is the same way. You can try to dominate it. You can try to force it into submission with discipline and willpower. And maybe you'll get compliance for a while. But the moment you relax, the moment your willpower depletes, your mind will rebel harder than before. Or you can befriend it. You can learn how it works. You can work with its nature instead of against it. You can build a relationship with it. And eventually, you'll have a mind that serves you not because you're forcing it to, but because you've aligned with its natural flow. This is Takeshi's secret. This is what the samurai knew. This is what modern productivity culture completely misses. The three practices of mental friendship. So how do you actually do this? How do you befriend your mind? The samurai developed three core practices, three approaches that, when combined, create what they called fudoshin, immovable mind. Not because the mind doesn't move, but because you don't move from your center regardless of what the mind does. Practice 1. Observation without judgment. The first practice is learning to observe your mind without judging what you see. This sounds easy. It's not. Because your default mode is to judge everything. A thought appears and immediately you label it. Good thought, bad thought, productive thought, distracting thought. And the moment you judge it, you create resistance. You create attachment. You create identification. But what if you just watched? What if a thought appeared and you simply noted it? There's a thought about work. There's a thought about that conversation. There's anxiety about the future. No judgment, no analysis, just observation. The samurai trained this through zazen, seated meditation. But you don't need to sit in a temple for hours. You can practice this right now in your daily life. When you're washing dishes, observe your thoughts. When you're walking, observe your thoughts. When you're working, periodically check in and observe what's happening in your mind without trying to change it. At first, this will feel impossible. Your mind will scream for attention. It will throw thought after thought at you, demanding that you engage. It's like a child throwing a tantrum. And what do you do with a tantrum-throwing child? You don't fight them. You don't lecture them. You don't try to reason with them in the middle of the tantrum. You stay calm. You stay present. You let the tantrum run its course, and eventually, it passes. Your mind is the same. When you stop fighting your thoughts, when you stop judging them, when you just observe, they lose their power. They come, they pass, and you remain centered. This is the first practice. Observation without judgment. Master this, and you've taken the first step toward befriending your mind. Practice 2. Redirection without force. The second practice is learning to redirect your attention without using force. This is the practical application of non-resistance. Because here's the thing. Just because you're not controlling your mind doesn't mean you're not guiding it. There's a huge difference. Control is forceful. Control is, I'm going to make myself focus on this task even though I hate it. Control is gritting your teeth and powering through with sheer willpower. Guidance is gentle. Guidance is, my attention has wandered to this thought. I notice that. Now I'm going to gently bring it back to what I want to focus on. Guidance is like a shepherd guiding sheep, firm but not violent. The samurai had a concept called zanshin, which is often translated as remaining mind or sustained awareness. It's the ability to stay present and aware even after an action is complete. A sword strike finishes, but your attention doesn't collapse. An opponent falls, but your awareness doesn't dissipate. You remain alert, poised, ready. In terms of attention, zanshin is the practice of gently and continuously bringing your focus back to the present moment without making it a battle. Your attention wanders. It will. That's what attention does. And you simply notice and redirect. No frustration, no self-criticism, just gentle redirection. Think of it like training a puppy. The puppy wanders off. You don't yell at it. You don't punish it. You gently call it back. It wanders again. You call it back again, over and over, patiently, consistently, without anger. Eventually, the puppy learns to stay by your side, not because you forced it, because you trained it through patient, consistent guidance. Your attention is the same. Wandering is not failure. Wandering is the default state of an untrained mind. Your job is not to prevent wandering. Your job is to notice when it happens and gently guide it back, again and again. Thousands of times a day if necessary. No force, no frustration, just gentle, consistent redirection. This is the second practice. And when combined with observation without judgment, you start to develop a completely different relationship with your attention. Instead of fighting your mind, you're working with it. Instead of being at war, you're in partnership. Practice 3. Alignment with nature. The third practice is the deepest and the most transformative. It's aligning your actions with your nature instead of against it. This is where most men completely lose the plot. Because society has told you what you should be. You should be ambitious. You should be disciplined. You should be optimizing every second of your day. You should be building an empire. But what if that's not your nature? What if your nature is different? I'm not talking about being lazy. I'm not talking about giving up on your potential. I'm talking about understanding that there are different paths to excellence. That a willow tree doesn't fail because it doesn't grow like an oak. The samurai understood this through the concept of michi, or the way. Every warrior had to find his way, not the way that worked for his teacher, not the way that worked for the legendary swordsman from 3 generations ago. His way. Miyamoto Musashi's way was isolation and relentless solo training. Yamaoka Teshu's way was Zen meditation and calligraphy. Yagyu Munenori's way was philosophical study and teaching. All 3 were master swordsmen. All 3 had immovable minds, but their paths were completely different. Your mind will fight you when you're trying to force it to be something it's not. But your mind will work with you when you're aligned with your nature. Here's a practical example. Maybe you're trying to force yourself to wake up at 5 a.m. because every productivity guru says that's what successful people do. But you're a night owl. Your mind is sharpest at 10 p.m. You do your best work late at night. So every morning you're in a battle with yourself. You set 12 alarms. You hate yourself for hitting snooze. You start your day already defeated. What if instead of fighting your nature, you worked with it? What if you designed your life around being a night owl? What if you stopped judging yourself for not being a morning person and instead optimized for when you're actually at your best? This isn't about excuses. This isn't about avoiding hard work. This is about strategic alignment, about working smarter, not just harder. The samurai called this shinri, or understanding the principle. Before you can master technique, you have to understand the underlying principle. And the principle here is, your mind serves you best when you're aligned with your nature, not fighting against it. So ask yourself, what is my nature? When do I actually focus best? What kind of work energizes me versus drains me? What environments help my mind settle versus create more chaos? What daily rhythms make me feel alive versus dead inside? And then, this is the crucial part, design your life around the answers. Stop trying to fit into someone else's template. Stop trying to be the person you think you should be. Start being the person you actually are, at your highest expression. This is the third practice, alignment with nature. And when you combine it with observation without judgment and redirection without force, something profound happens. Your mind stops being your enemy. It becomes your ally. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds great in theory, but what do I actually do? How do I implement this in my daily life? This is the crucial part, because knowledge without practice is worthless. Understanding without application is just mental masturbation. So let me give you the daily practice that will transform your relationship with your mind. This is not a morning routine. This is not a meditation app. This is not something you do for 10 minutes and then forget about. This is a way of operating throughout your entire day. Morning. Set your foundation. The samurai didn't start their day by checking messages or scrolling through distractions. They started with what they called seiza, or proper sitting. Not to clear their mind, remember that's a trap, but to establish their center, to observe the weather patterns in their mind before entering the battlefield of the day. Here's your morning practice. 5 minutes of sitting. That's it. Not meditation, not breath work, not guided visualization, just sitting in silence, with your back straight and your eyes slightly open, and observing whatever arises in your mind without judgment. Thoughts will come. Let them. Emotions will surface. Let them. Don't try to achieve some special state. Don't try to feel peaceful or focused or enlightened. Just sit and observe what is actually happening in your mind right now. This is not about becoming calm. This is about becoming aware, about seeing the actual state of your mind before you try to use it for anything else. Think of it like checking your instrument panel before taking off in a plane. You need to know what you're working with. Is there anxiety this morning? Is there excitement? Is there fog? Is there clarity? You can't address what you can't see. After 5 minutes, ask yourself 3 questions. What is my mind's weather today? Just observe and label: foggy, stormy, clear, turbulent, etc. What is one thing I can align with my nature today? Not what I should do, but what genuinely energizes me. What will I observe without judgment today? Choose one trigger, stress, distraction, emotion, to practice non-judgmental observation on. That's it. 5 minutes of sitting. 3 questions. You've set your foundation. Throughout the day, micro practices. The real practice happens in the moments between your practice, because your mind is operating 24/7. And if you only train it for 5 minutes in the morning, you're missing 99% of the opportunity. Here are 3 micro practices you can implement throughout your day. The redirect check. Every hour, pause for 10 seconds. Notice where your attention is. If it's where you want it to be, great. If it's not, gently redirect without judgment. No, I can't believe I got distracted again. Just notice and redirect. That's it. The samurai called this tanden, maintaining your center. A warrior who loses his center in battle dies. A man who loses his center throughout the day lives reactively, controlled by external forces. The resistance scan. When you notice frustration, stress, or inner conflict, ask yourself, what am I resisting right now? 9 times out of 10, you'll find you're fighting reality instead of working with it. Traffic, another person's behavior, your own thoughts or emotions, your body's energy levels. Once you identify the resistance, practice acceptance. Not passive acceptance, active acceptance. This is happening. I can't change it right now. What's my most effective action from this reality? The samurai practiced this in sparring. When an opponent attacked, the worst thing you could do was freeze or resist. You had to accept the reality of the attack instantly and respond. Hesitation, even mental hesitation, meant defeat. The nature alignment. Once a day, catch yourself doing something that feels like obligation or should. Pause and ask, is this aligned with my nature, or am I forcing something? If you're forcing, ask, can I adjust my approach to work with my nature instead of against it? Maybe you're trying to power through work when your energy is drained. What if you took a 15-minute walk first and then worked? Maybe you're trying to focus in a chaotic environment when you need silence. What if you changed your location? Maybe you're trying to do everything yourself when delegating would be more aligned. What if you asked for help? Small adjustments, big impact. All based on alignment instead of force. Evening. Reflect and reset. The samurai ended each day with what they called yudan, or oil-dan, the cutting of negligence. They reflected on their actions, their mistakes, their victories, not with judgment, but with the aim of learning. Here's your evening practice. 3 minutes of reflection. Ask yourself, where did I befriend my mind today? Moments where you observed, redirected, or aligned without force. Where did I fight my mind today? Moments where you tried to control, suppress, or force. What did my mind teach me today? What patterns emerged? What did you learn about your nature? Write down your answers. Not because you need a journal, because writing makes observation concrete. It moves insight from abstract awareness to tangible knowledge. And here's the crucial part. No self-judgment. You're not doing this to beat yourself up about your failures. You're doing this to gather data. You're a scientist studying your own mind, not a judge condemning it. The samurai knew that mastery comes from honest observation, not from pretending you're already perfect. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, because at some point, you're going to implement everything I've taught you, and your mind is still going to be chaotic. You're still going to have days where your attention is scattered, where you can't focus, where the mental noise is overwhelming. And you're going to think, this doesn't work. This philosophy is bullshit. I'm back to square one. Let me tell you what the samurai would tell you. This is exactly where the practice begins. The crisis point. There's a famous story about a samurai student who went to his master in frustration. He'd been practicing for years. He'd learned the techniques. He'd trained his mind. But in actual combat, when the pressure was highest, his mind still seized up. His training seemed to disappear. I failed, the student said. I cannot control my mind in the moment it matters most. The master smiled. Good. Now you can begin training. The student was confused. But I've been training for years. No, the master said. You've been practicing techniques. Now you can train reality. Techniques work in the dojo because the dojo is controlled. But reality is not controlled. Reality is chaotic, and a warrior must learn to befriend chaos, not just order. This is the crisis point that every man reaches on this path. The moment when you realize that befriending your mind doesn't mean your mind becomes perfectly obedient. It means you learn to work with it even when it's wild. The 3 types of mental weather. The samurai identified 3 types of mental weather that require different approaches. Clear weather. Your mind is naturally focused. Attention flows easily. This is when practice feels effortless. Most people think this is the goal, to make every day feel like this. It's not. Clear weather is a gift. Enjoy it. Use it, but don't expect it. Don't attach to it, because weather changes. Cloudy weather. Your mind is slightly foggy. Focus requires more effort. Distractions are more frequent. This is the most common state for most men. This is where micro-practices matter most. On cloudy days, you lean into gentle redirection. You're more patient with yourself. You take more breaks. You work with your mind's natural rhythm instead of demanding peak performance. Storm weather. Your mind is in chaos. Anxiety, overwhelm, racing thoughts, complete inability to focus. Everything feels like it's falling apart. This is where most men panic. This is where they think the practice has failed. But the samurai had a different perspective. Storm weather is where warriors are forged. Working with storm weather. When your mind is in storm mode, you cannot force it to be calm. You cannot willpower your way out of it. You cannot just focus. Anyone who tells you otherwise has never actually experienced a real mental storm. So what do? The samurai had a practice called Mizu no Kokoro, or mind like water. When a stone is thrown into a lake, the water doesn't resist the splash. It doesn't try to stay calm. It allows the disruption and then, naturally, returns to stillness. Your mind is the same. When the storm hits, you don't fight it. You allow it. You give it space. You let it be what it is. Practically, this means acknowledge the storm. My mind is in chaos right now. This is happening. No denial. No, I should be better than this. Just honest acknowledgement. Lower your expectations. On storm days, you're not going to do your best work. Accept that. Adjust your plans accordingly. Do what you can do, not what you wish you could do. Physical reset. Often, mental storms are physical. Your nervous system is dysregulated. You're running on stress hormones. The fastest way to settle a mental storm is to address the body first. Walk, exercise, cold exposure, deep breathing, whatever physically resets your system. Minimal engagement. Don't make major decisions during a storm. Don't have difficult conversations. Don't try to solve complex problems. Do maintenance work. Do simple tasks. Do things that keep you moving forward without demanding peak mental performance. Trust the pattern. Storms pass. They always do. The weather changes. Your mind will settle. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it will. Trust that. The samurai knew this from experience. Before a major battle, their minds would often enter storm mode. Fear, doubt, anxiety, all normal. The difference between a master and a novice wasn't that the master didn't experience the storm. It's that the master knew how to function within it. We're near the end now, and I want to leave you with the ultimate test of whether you've actually befriended your mind or whether you're still trying to control it. This test was given to samurai students after years of training. It was simple, brutal, and revealed everything. The test of inaction. The master would tell the student, sit, do nothing, for as long as it takes. No time limit, no goal, no end point. Just sit. And when you think you're done, sit longer. When your mind screams that you should be doing something productive, sit longer. When every fiber of your being wants to move, to act, to do something, sit longer. Why was this the ultimate test? Because it revealed the truth of your relationship with your mind. If you're still trying to control your mind, this test will break you. You'll feel like you're going insane. You'll feel like you're wasting time. You'll feel like something is wrong, like you're failing, like this can't possibly be the right thing to do. But if you've actually befriended your mind, something different happens. You sit. The chaos comes. You observe it. You don't fight it. You let it be. And gradually, not through force, but through friendship, your mind settles. Not because you made it settle, because you allowed it to settle. This is the difference. This is what Takeshi's secret reveals. The mind that is controlled is always one moment away from rebellion, but the mind that is befriended becomes your greatest ally. The 3 signs of friendship. How do you know if you've actually befriended your mind? Here are 3 signs. Sign 1. You stop fearing your own thoughts. Negative thoughts arise, but they don't derail you. You see them as weather, not as truth. You observe them without identification. They come, they pass, and you remain centered. Sign 2. You can sit with discomfort without collapsing into distraction. Boredom, anxiety, restlessness. You can feel these states without immediately reaching for your phone, for food, for any escape. You can simply be with what is. Sign 3. Your actions flow from alignment, not from force. You work hard, but it doesn't feel like you're at war with yourself. You challenge yourself, but it doesn't feel like self-punishment. You're demanding, but not abusive. Disciplined, but not rigid. These signs emerge naturally. You don't force them. You don't achieve them through willpower. They arise as a consequence of consistent practice over time. So let me bring this home. Let me tie this all together. You can't control your mind. You've probably spent years trying, and it hasn't worked. It's created more chaos, more frustration, more inner conflict. You fought a war with yourself that you can never win. Takeshi's secret is simple but profound. Stop fighting. Start befriending. Your mind is not your enemy. It's not a beast that needs to be tamed. It's not a machine that needs to be programmed. It's a companion that needs to be understood. And when you shift from control to relationship, When you practice observation without judgment, redirection without force, and alignment with nature, everything changes. Your mind stops working against you. It starts working with you. Not perfectly, not every day, but progressively, consistently, meaningfully. This is what the samurai knew. This is what modern productivity culture misses. This is what will set you apart in a world full of men who are still at war with themselves. The path is clear. The practice is simple. Now it's on you to walk it. Stop trying to control your mind. Befriend it instead. That's Takeshi's secret. That's the way of the warrior. That's how you master the one weapon that matters most, the space between your ears. Now go practice. And when your mind resists, when it rebels, when it refuses to cooperate, remember, that's not failure. That's the beginning of friendship. If this resonated with you, if you're ready to go deeper into the samurai way of mental mastery, subscribe to this channel. We're building something different here, something real, something that actually changes men instead of just entertaining them. Drop a comment below telling me, what's your biggest struggle with your own mind? Where do you get stuck? Let's talk about it. And remember, the warrior's path is not about perfection. It's about practice. It's about showing up every day and befriending the chaos. That's the way. That's the only way. Until next time, stay centered.